Warbles on a lot to YouTube with a movie about the K.K.K. in Australia, otherwise known as Kilted Celtic Clowns. Now, to set the tone, we begin with a quote from the Messiah's Handbook, Reminders for the Advanced Soul. A sad little lizard told me that he was a brontosaurus on his great-grandfather's side. I did not laugh at him, nor mock, nor scorn, as claims to ancestral greatness are often the only thing sustaining an otherwise miserable soul living an apparently insignificant life. Now, you can find the Messiah's Handbook, or excerpts from it, in a book called Illusions, written by Richard Bach. Now, the word Celt, or in the United Kingdom Celt, because that's how they pronounce it, comes from the ancient Greek word Keltoi, K-E-L-T-O-I, and Keltoi is what the Greeks called the barbarians who lived on the north side of the Swiss Alps. Anywhere from Spain to Norway, that was where the Keltoi lived. Barbarians. Now, spool that forward 350 years ago. A Welshman called William Lloyd, in a fit of anti-English sentiment, decided, off his own bat, in a fit of scholastic inspiration, that everybody from the Breton in Spain and France, through the Isle of Man, the Irish, the Scottish, the Welsh, the Cornish, anybody who had one of those Gaelic style of languages, they were the Celtic peoples. He decided they were an homogeneous nation on the basis of language similarities and the fact that the ancient Greeks called anybody who lived north of the Alps Keltoi. He decided he and his mob were the Celtic barbarians, right? 350 years ago. Now, the next really pivotal event happens in Scotland in 1749 at the Battle of Culloden. And up until then, there were still a few traditional Scottish clan chieftains trying to live with their tribes in the traditional medieval feudal fashion, which means that the clan chief dispenses low, middle and high justice, holds all the land for the whole clan, appoints a taxman to run around and collect the rents and pull down people's roofs if they don't pay the rent, has a clan bard, which is an hereditary position, sits up on a hill, a little bit like I am at the moment, to watch the battle and note who behaves bravely and who behaves badly. The clan chief would have gone to university in, say, Ireland or France, dressed in silk, spoke 3 to 5 languages, ate really good foods, and the sort of things that history says of the clan chiefs is that when a woman was caught stealing from the clan chief, that was considered stealing from the whole clan. So they waited till low tide and they tied her by the hair to the seaweed, and she drowned as the tide came in. That was her penalty, right? High, middle and low justice. If one of the peasants refused to come out of his humbly and pick up his pitchfork and fight behind the clan chief, then the taxman would not only pull his roof down, he would burn the roof beam, which was a bit of a disaster because they didn't have any trees big enough to build roof beams out of because of how their ancestors had lived. So, Bonnie Prince Charles swans up to Scotland, talks to some clan chiefs and amasses a bit of an army, and the clan chiefs are fairly cunning. They put half their sons on Prince Charles's side and the other half of their sons fighting on the side of the English, so whoever wins, the cunning clan chiefs are going to be in front. And whereas the Scottish clan warrior swung a broadsword, needed a bit of space to swing his broadsword, and they were particularly good at guerrilla insurgency tactics, Bonnie Prince Charles got them to go without food for 2 days, do an all-night march so they hadn't had any sleep for 2 or 3 days, and then at about sunrise to early morning, run uphill for a mile, into the rain, into the wind, into the artillery, into the musketry. And the English redcoats had been trained to stand 36 inches apart instead of 48 inches apart. And when the Scottish chieftain raised his arm to lift his sword to swing it at the Englishman in front of him ignored it, and the bloke standing on his right hand side stuck his bayonet into the armpit that was raising the Scottish clan chief's sword. So the Battle of Culloden was a total disaster for the Scots. Anybody who helped Bonnie Prince Charles was shot on the day, or they were hunted down and imprisoned and perhaps transported if they weren't hung, or if they didn't starve to death or die of infection in the prison hulks. In Ireland, there were the clearances going on in Ireland and the clearances going on in Scotland, and what was happening was people realised they could make more money renting the land out to English sheep farmers than renting it to traditional peasants. So the traditional Celtic or Celtic people in Scotland and Ireland in particular, and Wales and Cornwall, all over England, they got forced off the land by the sheep. And one of the places they got forced into was Canada, and another one was New Zealand, another one was Australia. And around here, I live in the town of Glen, right, Valley of the Innes. My bit of dirt is at Dundee. South of town there's a place called Glencoe. There's a mountain called Ben Lomond. There's another one called Ben Nevis. There's a town called Llangothen, spelt with 2 L's at the start. There's another town called Dumersq, D-U-M-E-R-S-Q for the Welsh. If you go east of here, there's Aberdeen. If you go south of here, there's Aberdeen. There's Maclean, there's Perth, there's Newcastle, there's Campbelltown, there's Newcastle again. You know, there's geographical names scattered across the landscape to remind the first settlers of their Celtic and English origins ad infinitum ad nauseam. But to be absolutely brutally honest, there are no more Celtic descended people here in the New England tablelands around Glen Innes than there is anywhere else in Australia. To suggest otherwise would be like saying that somewhere in Israel there's one town which has more refugees from the European Holocaust than any other town in Israel, because of the names of the properties that those Holocaust refugees and their descendants have scattered on the landscape around that town. Okay, that is my point. There is no reason for claiming that Glen Innes is a concentration of Celticness in Australia. It is a foolish notion. Now, to give you an idea of what things were like in the middle of the 1800s, in 1850, a silk weaver at Spitalfields in London was working 6.5 days a week. They were making 2 shillings and 7pence gross income. They were eating 6 kinds of food: coffee, tea, sugar, rice, bread and salt. And that was fairly average. I mean, life in London, the industrial capital of the world, was absolute shit for its people. So they were really happy to get the fuck out of there and come to somewhere like Australia. And when they got here, when the white people got here, the Australian Aborigines worked for 2 hours per person per day to have 368 different kinds of foods in a year. The crowned heads of Europe didn't live as good as an Australian Aborigine. And in the 1840s, the sheep came to the New England tablelands. And in the 1970s, this place up here was turned into Centennial Park to commemorate the 100 years of New South Wales being an independent colony. In the 1880s, they decided that they needed to have a standing stones committee to attract tourists to Glen Innes. And the Chamber of Commerce, with their little committee, got pretty serious about it. They sent a fella who used to be the mayor over to the United Kingdom, and he had a look at various stone circles and came back and talked to an architect, and they came up with this general arrangement where you've got true north and you've got a little avenue to show the sunrise on the winter solstice shining against a central stone. You've got sunset for the winter solstice, you've got the equinoxes, which have just passed, sunrise and sunset, and you've got the summer sunrise and summer sunset. Now, one of the strange things they decided to do, considering that people who built megalithic stone circles used cubits, Royal-Cubits and Megalithic-Yards, the distance from here to here is 25 metres. The distance from here to here is 33 metres. The distance from here to here is 100 metres. So it's a Napoleonic metric French layout for a set of standing slivers. And I say standing slivers because they are overtopped by young eucalyptus saplings. They're not actually very big. The backhoe could lift 22 tonnes, so they weigh an average of 19 tonnes. The Australian Celtic standing slivers. Now if they'd been built by a genuine megalithic stonemason, the inner face of the stones would be dressed to fit the circumference of the circle. And to prevent interference with the local ley line network, if you were going to have 5 feet of stone sticking down into the ground, then you would have to dig a 10-foot deep pit, 10 foot across, and you would have to half fill the pit with quartz chips and then bed the worked, smoothed stone in a pit of quartz chips. Otherwise, the Beaker folk, named after their pottery, who built Stonehenge, they believed that the charged stones, the charge caused by the stonemason working the stone, hitting it, implying a male charge every time he hit it or a female charge every time she hit it, those charged stones would create new ley lines to all the existing ley lines on the landscape, and as a result, the story is that the rainfall patterns would alter and the soil fertility would go to shit and the crops would fail and the civilisation would fall. And these things went up in 1992. What's happened to Australia's weather patterns since these things were put in the ground? Interesting question, isn't it? As you can see, they're set in a concrete pit. The drill marks from the expandite process have been left in place, and they've made almost no effort to try and get a circumference of the circle portrayed by the stones. It really is a seriously pathetic effort. So we have stones that are not dressed and finished, laid out, measured in the wrong measurements, Napoleonic metres instead of megalithic yards, not set in quartz pits. And this is the official Australian standing stones. And every year the Kilted Klowns in kilts hold a convention here, so maybe I should be calling this the K.K.K, Celtic Klowns Convention. And they come here and they conduct their tourist-oriented activities. One of the most ridiculous of which is the parade. And in order to add colour and spectacle to the parade, could you imagine the Jews in our hypothetical town in Israel inviting military reenactors to dress up as Gestapo and SS Sonderkommandos to march with all the European Holocaust survivors to commemorate the strong ties between the Gestapo, the SS and the European Jews? Well, believe it or not, in the parade at the Australian Celtic standing slivers, they have military reenactors dressed as Roman legionaries in chrome-plated armour with swords and spears and turtle shields. And they have more military reenactors dressed as English redcoats of the Black Watch, the Campbells, the Scottish mercenaries who massacred their countrymen in order to be paid by the British. So, if you would like to see the Kilted Klowns in kilts, or kilted kilts in clowns, or kilted Celtic clowns, however you want to put it, come to Glen for the festival of fake Celticness, faux European megalithic plastic stonework. In fact, it's not even plastic, not proper plastic. For a serious go at a plastic Stonehenge, you do it in fiberglass, full scale on an airfield where there's nothing to overtop the stones and make them look small and puny. There's a fella in America has one. And the American plastic Stonehenge beats the shit out of the Australian one, I have to say. Ciao.